Oh, all right. I think I'm on. Yes. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. Talk about one of my favorite topics, minimum viable products or MVPs. So I just want to make sure people can see my slides. Hopefully, people can see them. Let's see if we can get confirmation. Oh, there we go. Okay, fantastic. There they are. Okay, fantastic. You get to see me and the slides on the screen. So uh, today we're going to talk about the 5 biggest MVP mistakes and how to avoid them. And again, I said this is one of my favorite topics. My name is Ben Yoskovitz, founding partner of Highline Beta. You can see a couple of links there. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is available there. I did write a book a number of years ago called the Lean Analytics. You can take a look at that book there. It's about lean startup and lean analytics, how to use data to build a better startup or a better business. And then my newsletter, which is weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, sometimes weekly, startups, venture studios, product management, data and analytics. It's a bit of a mishmash, but please, take a look at my newsletter. And if you think it's valuable, subscribe to that. I'll go into a little bit of background on myself. I've been in the tech space since 1996. That's when I started my first company. My most recent company is called Highline Beta, and we're a venture studio and venture capital firm. I've been in the tech space a long time, B2B, B2C, all software companies. I've been an angel investor. Now I'm investing through a venture studio and venture capital model where we build startups from inception. Often we do that in partnership with corporates or family offices, where we're leveraging the assets that they have, whether it's customers, distribution, data, analytics, capital, to identify growth opportunities for them and spin out into new startups. We've got a portfolio of 22 companies. We've built a myriad of other corporate ventures that live inside of with our corporate partners. You can see some examples here: Relay, Requity, Charge Lab. These are all startups that we've helped build and fund. And we work across a host of different industries, from consumer packaged goods to financial services, quite a bit in the insurance space, and recently have been going into some very narrow verticals, including dental tech and Ethereum. And always happy to talk about random stuff like that. But again, Highline Beta, we started that almost 9 years ago. A venture studio where we build and fund companies from inception. So we spent a lot of time in that early validation phase and the MVP building phase. Let's jump right in. Mistake number 1, not understanding the definition of MVP. And I know that this is a contentious issue, perhaps, that a lot of people continue to talk about. People hate the term MVP now. So it was sort of nice when the folks at Glorium Technologies reached out and said, hey, will you talk about MVPs? I'm like, I thought MVPs were dead. I still love it, but a lot of people don't love that term anymore. And it's because they've kind of ruined the definition of it. And what happened was the term started to become the minimum crappy product. And people built the smallest thing, the crappiest thing they could build just to launch something and ship it, not creating enough value for users or customers. And so when we think MVP, don't think minimum crappy product. In fact, I would argue that the bar for the MVP is going up and up and up and up. And so if you don't realize that, you end up making that critical mistake. So we have tons of alternatives: MLP, minimum lovable product, SLC, which I think is not bad, simple, lovable, complete. There's a whole bunch of others. I honestly don't even remember what all of these mean, but people just try to say MVP is not good enough. Let's come up with other terms. And the mistake here is not understanding the definition, but also just getting caught up in acronyms and buzzwords and all of that nonsense, and spending more time worrying about that than creating value. So I wanted to share my definition of MVP, which I think if you focus on this definition and you really understand what this means, you won't make this mistake. An MVP is the smallest version of a product needed to prove that you've solved a user's or customer's problem. So the smallest version, that still holds true, because if you're a product person or a dev, we know you like to build features and add and add and add and add. So you do have to try to identify the smallest version. It has to be a product, i.e. you have to build something. So a landing page, in my opinion, not an MVP. A prototype that doesn't do something, but is just a clickable thing, for example, not an MVP. And you have to have solved the user's or customer's problem. So you have to validate there's a real problem, build something that solves it, ideally that smallest version, and prove that you've solved the problem. If you do that, that's the MVP. So the V in minimum viable product is not viable, it can scale, it's viable, it creates value. So that's really the key that I hope you remember when you think about MVP. And if you can get everybody aligned on that definition on your team or your startup or whatever group you're working with, you're not going to make the mistake of misdefining this term and getting confused or ignoring the point of MVP. The second mistake, and this shouldn't be a surprise, is not understanding the user or customer problem deeply enough. And despite Lean Startup being out for many, many years, and other folks like myself writing a book, Lean Analytics, and others talking about this idea of you have to understand users, this is just still fundamentally a mistake people make. And if you get this wrong, it's really hard to build an actual MVP that makes sense. And if we don't start with this fundamental, you end up just wandering the desert. So I don't know if any of you have had this experience of building things that nobody wants. I've done it. It sucks. I've done this a number of times. I've made the mistake. I would say the worst was 2007 to 2010. Started a company called Standout Jobs in the recruitment space. We looked at how recruitment was done. We said, this is painful. It sucks. You ask people, any company, it doesn't matter what company, do they have a hard time recruiting? They'll tell you yes, from the coolest tech companies in the world to the most boring or crappy companies in the world. Everybody has a hard time recruiting top talent. We looked at that and said, well, we're smart. We can innovate in this space. Let's go build a company that solves recruiting. And we didn't understand the customer well enough. And ultimately we failed. We sold the assets of that company after raising almost $2 million. I've swore to myself after that experience, I would never build something that people don't want. And so the key is to understand how to figure that out. And so the way I like to define a problem is this. I need a user that's very clearly defined. I need a need, and I need an insight. And I don't know if this deck will be shared with folks after. I know the recording is going out there, but I put a bunch of links in here for folks. These are often links to resources that I find useful, sometimes to articles I've written in my own newsletter. User, need, insight. Let's break this down quickly. So what is the user? A specific person, not a generic group. So for example, often I'll see like a startup say, we're building something for small businesses. I'm like, I don't even know what the definition of a small business is. Are we talking 5-person companies, 500-person companies? That's not a user. That's too broad. So I'm looking for a very specific person, not a generic group of users. And you have to figure out who they are. And my preference is the narrower, the better. Let me give you an example of that. So this was a company that I invested in back in 2011, 2012. It was called High Score House. And the idea was to motivate kids to do things around the house, do chores, do activities, earn points that they could then redeem for rewards that they wanted. So, the way we would describe this was bribe your kids to do the things you wanted them to do. Obviously, that's not how we would describe it publicly, but that's kind of what it was doing. And what we learned when we started talking to users, particularly moms, was that, not surprisingly, not all moms are created equal. So again, I'll generalize here, but about half the moms that we engaged with love this idea. They would say, we're using chore charts, we're using other systems to motivate and reward our kids, but they're not working that well. But we fundamentally believe in that approach to parenting. And then we would have other moms say, how dare you? How dare you try to bribe your children? How dare you use this sort of system for motivating kids to do things? So 50% of moms loved it, 50% of moms hated it. And I was perfectly fine with that, because going out and saying moms is a market is silly. We wanted to find our early adopters. I didn't want to convince moms that didn't believe in this approach. I wanted to go to moms who already believed in this approach. So that's the user. Then we go and we look at the need. So what is the need that people have? And the first thing that we look at is functional pain. This is the easiest place to start. It's the thing that's the most obvious. You see somebody doing something with a hack or doing something slowly or inefficiently, and you think, I think I can make that process better. There's risk when you do that, but that's the simplest thing to do, is just find a clear functional need. And that's, again, where most people start, and can be fairly obvious. This is a little bit where jobs to be done can be useful. And then we go to insight, and insight is an aha. It's arguably, I think, almost the only competitive advantage left in the world, where we say, we've learned something that nobody else knows about our user and customer, and we're going to build our entire business around that thing. So these are just a quick couple of definitions about what is, in fact, an actual insight, understanding the why, not the what. It's the underlying reasoning behind the human behavior that you see. Humans are not, for the most part, or not all the time, rational. So what is the irrational? What is going on behind the scenes? The why behind the what? That's what we're looking for when we talk about insight. But insights are hard to come by, and they take time. And so you can't go and say, I want to go build a new business, a new startup, a new product, and immediately necessarily have an insight. It's quite difficult to do. So what we look for instead is what we call a deeper need or attention, something social or emotional that's happening underlying the functional need. And this is almost always prevalent. If it's not, it might mean that the functional need is not that important. And often I get asked, well, what about in a B2B situation? We're building software to make some process in a manufacturing facility more efficient. I would suggest to you that there is still a social and emotional or deeper need or tension there. It's usually something like, I want to look good in front of my boss. I want to beat somebody else in my company at something. I want to get promoted. I want to get a raise. There's something human about why we're trying to solve a pain point, and you've got to go find that deeper need or that tension. You also have to remember that all of these things are assumptions. So when you start, you think it's a certain group. You think this is the need that they have. You think that this is the deeper need or tension, the social or emotional underlying thing that's going on, but you don't actually know. And you have to go validate and test that, ideally before you build an MVP or through the MVP. And so your job, the way I think about this, and the mistake, again, that people make, is not understanding this enough, building for the sake of building and not finding the truth. But that's, in fact, your job all the time, is to find the truth. And I would also say you have to beware of universal truths. A universal truth is something we all see. We shouldn't drink too much alcohol. We shouldn't smoke. We should walk more. We should exercise. We should, whatever the case may be. And so when I can Google something and I know it's a trend or a thing that's a universal truth, and you do and everybody else does as well, it's very difficult to build a successful business off of a universal truth, because we can all see it. There's no differentiation in that. So let me give you a quick, simple example of this. And this is sort of, tell me something I don't know to, so the universal truth, let's say for Airbnb, might be something like, people like to travel to see new places. Now, not everybody likes to travel, but a lot of people do. And if you said, oh, people like to travel, I'm going to go build a travel startup, you're going to lose, because you don't understand the customer, you haven't segmented the market enough, and you're just building for the sake of building. The inspirational insight is the modern traveler, so that's a specific user, wants more than exotic locations around the globe. They want to be inspired and feel like a local as soon as they walk through the door. That's Airbnb. That's from, let's build a hotel for people because people like to travel, to let's do local activities and local events. And everything about Airbnb is driven by this sense of, I want to feel like a local. I can build a unique, differentiated business off that insight. I can't off the universal truth. Okay, so mistake number 3 is not defining the right scope. And so earlier I said the definition is the smallest version of a product, but how do we define what that actually means? So again, what's the shortest path from the problem to value creation? I've validated there's a problem. I'm going to build a thing. It's going to create value for the user and ostensibly solve the problem. What's the shortest path there that I can define? I already mentioned assumptions. This is an assumption tracker. It's very, very simple. So the way I like to think about this is write down every single assumption you have and solve your riskiest assumptions first as you're figuring out what to build. So what do I build? I better build something that solves my riskiest assumptions. And I like to use something from design thinking, which is desirability, viability, feasibility. So I'm looking for assumptions that are D, V, or F. Usually we focus on the D first, less on the viability. In this case, viability means, will people buy it? Can I scale it? Do the economics make sense? Feasibility means, can I build it? That could be technical, could be legal, could be compliance. But ultimately, to figure out the right scope, you've got to identify your riskiest assumptions. Then what you want to do is define the core use case for your MVP. So the way I think about this sometimes is, what's at the heart of your product? What is at the center of the product where the core value is generated? And then you build a whole bunch of other features around it. And every single product out there has some core to it. True of consumer products, true of B2B products as well. So think Instagram, the core of that is posting a photo and getting engagement on that photo. The core of Facebook might be connecting with friends. The core of Asana is a project. Everything is built around a project. So the whole business is, they want you creating more projects, connecting more people to those projects, getting more value from that, and then it going from there and more projects. So what is at the core heart of the product? You've really got to define that, the core use case for the product. Again, there's a whole bunch of other extra stuff you can build after, but you got to figure it out. Then you've got to define the expected frequency of usage. So you've built a product, or you're going to build a product. How often do you think users are going to use that product? Ideally, you set a line in the sand and you say, this is a social product. I need people to use it every day. This is a B2B product for managing finances. I need people to use it every month. If the frequency is less than once a month, I get pretty nervous about it, because again, your ability to iterate and experiment and learn is reduced. But not every product is a daily use product either. But you have to figure out what you think the usage target is for that core of your product, because early on when you launch an MVP, usage equals value. If they use the product, they're most likely getting value from the product. Now, you still have to figure out why and how and so on and so forth. But the core of this is the simplest version of the product, that it has a core component to it, the heart of the product. Usage is X times per week, per month. That's your target. Get it in hands of users and see if they start using it at that frequency to determine if you are in fact creating value and solving a problem. So I like this model. I don't know if people have seen this before. You probably have. It's the hooked model by Nirayal. And really what this is describing is a behavior loop that you want to create in your product. And this would exist in any product. There's some trigger that tells people, hey, go do a thing. We want you to go do this thing. They take an action. They get a reward, some variable reward ideally, which then encourages them to invest more in the product, which drives the trigger, and it goes on and on and on. So that core heart of your product, in my mind, has to be some version of this loop that is encouraging the right behaviors over and over again. So a few questions you need to answer when you think about the scope of the MVP. What do you want users doing in your product that drives small but valuable engagement loops, either for them or for others? So again, this is just this concept of, what are they going to do? Does that drive value for them? Does that encourage them to use the product more? And have I demonstrated this loop behavior at a frequency that I think I could build a business off of? How quickly can users do what you want them to? So time to value becomes a key component here. So I get users in the product. How quickly can I get them to do the things I want them to do, to see the value, to get the reward at the end? How easy and quickly do users get value from the product? So how quickly do I get them in doing a thing? How quickly does that drive value? Again, I obsess about these things when I'm thinking about the scope of the MVP and getting that right, not building too little, not building too much. Why would someone use it in the first place? So is the value proposition clear enough? So even before they get into the product, to me, part of the MVP is the stuff is the value prop. It is the landing page. It is the thing that engages them to drive them into the product. If you get the value prop wrong, it doesn't matter if you built awesome features. Nobody's going to come in and want to try. Another thing to think about when we think about MVP scope, what are users doing before they use your product? What are they doing after they use your product? And the reason I like this is these might be signals to where the MVP or the feature set could go. So you're targeting some slice of a person's life, a day in the life of a user. You're targeting some specific component of that. But then you notice every time before they come into your product or every time after, they're doing something else. You understand the user's behavior, their day in a life. That might signal to you how you could go, I think of it like to the left and to the right, where you could add more functionality to create more value for users and start to eat up more of the stuff that they're doing. So again, this is maybe helping to define the scope of the MVP, or you start with a narrow MVP and realize where you can expand after that. And then finally, does the business model drive more engagement with the core product? So when we build an MVP, of course, we're trying to figure out whether we've got a real problem and we've built a solution that creates value. But I'm also thinking, is there a business here to be built, right? Is this thing going to generate revenue for me? Am I going to be able to scale this thing? And one way to start figuring that out at the MVP stage is, does the business model drive more engagement? So if I use Asana as my example, I create projects, and Asana prices based on the number of projects you have. So if they can drive you to create more projects, invite more people, and those people then engage or create more projects, that's going to drive the business model. So you actually have a loop between usage of the product, value creation, driving the business model, and the business model encourages more usage. And if you can build that into the MVP and start to validate it, you've got the right scope. What you leave out is as important as what you include. And this is hard. Admittedly, this is a difficult thing to do, particularly when we start to look at things like enterprise software. Because enterprise software, every customer is going to say, I need access control, admin control. I need reporting. I need this other sophisticated thing. I need integration into my legacy systems. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true. You're going to have to really figure that out. Again, that's through interviewing users, testing things with users early, maybe co-designing things with users or customers appropriately. But you have to make these hard decisions because you can't just build everything that everybody wants. That's not an MVP anymore. So the MVP is a process, not a point in time. And what that means is you build an MVP, you launch it, you start getting users on board, and then you don't say, cool, I'm done with this idea of minimum viable product. In fact, in my mind, that MVP idea, build, measure, learn, iterate, experiment continuously, stays with you the whole time. So we have a problem, we have value, we're building something in the middle here. We think it's our MVP, but we're not 100% sure yet. We iterate over and over and over again. So don't think of it like, I built an MVP, I never have to think about that again. Now I just have a backlog of stuff and I can just keep building features and features and features and everything's going to be okay. I build something, I figure out if it creates value. If it doesn't create enough value, if there's not enough usage of that core capability in my product, I've got to keep iterating. That's the actual MVP. The MVP is a process over time of lots and lots of iteration. And another term I'll throw out there, and you may have heard this term before, is problem solution fit. And what that means is I validated there's a problem, I built a solution to it, in this case an MVP, and I've proven through usage data, through value creation, through the evidence I'm getting from my users and customers that the solution actually solves the problem. That is not product market fit. Product market fit comes much, much later. But problem solution fit is arguably what, in my mind, the MVP is designed to do. We might build 10 MVPs, right, over and over until we get it right. We have a problem, we created value, we've proven we've solved the problem for our early adopters. That's our MVP. Okay, mistake number 4 is this: assuming AI excuse me, solves every problem. Building with AI is awesome, but it's leading to many bad habits. I love the AI tools. I use a whole bunch of them, constantly experimenting with them. Lovable is one that I use a lot, just prompting it, and it's building web applications for me. There's Cursor. There's a whole host of tools, and they're just getting better and better, more and more interesting, cooler and cooler. But it's encouraging people to just build for the sake of building. And that's the part that scares me the most. So AI, to me, isn't an excuse to ignore the fundamentals of building a good product, solving a real problem, creating real value. So here's some examples of things that I've heard people say. We can build so quickly, we don't need to interview or understand users. To me, that's insane. Yes, you can build super quickly. Yes, you can launch things in market and test it with users. And by all means, you should build quickly and you should test things in market with customers quickly. You shouldn't spend 6 months just talking to users. That's a mistake. That's analysis paralysis. But if you do not understand the users, back to mistake number 2 of not deeply understanding the problem and who has it and why, I can almost guarantee you that you're going to fail. You might stumble into something, but that's luck. Luck is not a repeatable process. We can build anything. So let's tackle any industry we want, even if we don't understand it at all. I see this a ton. Arguably, I've made this mistake. I mentioned standout jobs before. Didn't understand the recruitment space intimately enough. Didn't understand how HR bought software. Didn't understand the pain points they were facing inside of their own organizations. We just saw that recruitment sucked. We thought we could build cool technology to solve it. We built cool technology. People were like, I love this technology. It's so cool. It's so amazing. We got that kind of feedback. Nobody bought it. Nobody used it. And by the time we figured out why and how to try to fix that, it was too late. So don't just look at an industry or a process and say, well, that's stupid. Why is it like that? I can build with AI and solve that pain point, or I can use AI to solve that pain point. But you might not understand why a process or a system or a methodology or even an industry operate the way they do. And they might be inefficient and they might look silly or stupid to you from the outside, but there's going to be a human reason for it on the inside. I'm not saying AI can't solve it. I'm saying you have to understand it super, super deeply. Let's just launch and see what happens. This is the if we build it, they will come mantra, which existed arguably before Lean Startup came out and grew in popularity and then kind of died down. And now I'm seeing it come back, this idea of like, well, shoot, we can just launch anything we want. Let's just launch 5 things at the same time, see what happens. Except I don't understand the user. I don't really understand the pain point. I don't really understand the core of what I'm building. I'm just building because it's easy to do. And now it's just a mess. And I'm just creating more chaos and not what I would describe as focused chaos, which is how building products really looks. Let's add more features to the product because we can. Again, AI tools allow us to add more stuff to products faster. Again, super cool, super powerful. I love it. We use it all the time at Highline Beta. Every one of our portfolio companies is using AI to co-develop functionality for their solutions. But adding more features to a product, in my experience, has never helped sell more product. It's never helped solve the problem of not fundamentally creating value in the core. If you get the core wrong, it doesn't matter if you add all these whiz-bang, funky AI things to your product or your solution, you're still going to fail. So again, to me, AI isn't an excuse to ignore the fundamentals. The fundamentals still hold absolutely true. AI should supercharge the work that you're doing to validate stuff, to build MVPs, to test and learn. So AI is amazing, but don't get ahead of yourself. Use it for rapid prototyping and user testing 100%. That might be the work you do pre-MVP, let's say. I just want to build a bunch of things. I want to learn from customers. But again, the core of lean methodology, which in my mind still holds true today as it ever did, is build, measure, learn. So increase your velocity through build, measure, learn. Instead of running 1 experiment a week, I can maybe run 5 experiments in a week. That's amazing, but they still have to be good experiments. They can't just be, let's just throw stuff at a wall and see what sticks. Use it for production level code and products, but be thoughtful about it. So I've done a lot of, I hate the term vibe coding because it just sounds absurd to me, but I've done a lot of vibe coding. I'm sure you've done a lot of vibe coding. It's kind of there. I think the hype is ahead, which is almost always the case. The hype is ahead of the reality. I'm seeing posts on LinkedIn where people are like, 90% of my code is vibe code. And it's like, okay, does it scale? Is it secure? When you vibe code something, does it break a feature that you already liked? Yes, it does. So use it for that sort of thing. Code develop with AI tools. Certainly build AI solutions to problems, but just be careful and thoughtful about it. Okay, mistake number 5, not tracking the right data. So I would say the number one lesson that I have for you here is to never stop talking to users. Often what I see when folks launch an MVP, launch a product in market, is they instrument the whole thing, which is a good thing, tracking all the events. What are people doing? Where are people going? How often are they clicking? So on and so forth. And you want to measure that usage data, of course. But they stop talking to users unless users complain and send in feedback. To me, that's a huge, huge mistake. And you're missing a fundamental key point of understanding what's going on. So the lesson that we shared in Lean Analytics was this: quantitative data tells us what is happening. I've instrumented an onboarding flow. I see them going through it. I see them, the drop-off is high on step 5 of my onboarding flow. And so then I move the button around, I change it, I remove the step, I add a step. I don't actually know why people are doing it. So the quant data tells us what is happening. The qual data, the talking to the users, the soliciting feedback, tells us why. If you can figure out how to marry those two things together, the quant data is often a signal, something flares up. Hey, people are trying to do something here. I don't understand why they're doing it. Hey, people seem to be clicking this over and over again. I'm not sure, it's not what we intended. Let's go figure that out. Hey, people are not getting through the onboarding flow. People aren't creating their first project. Whatever it is, that tells you what is happening. It sends up flares. Then you've got to go dig into that and figure out why. And that's the detective work of talking to users. Okay, so let me wrap up quickly because I know we want to leave some time for questions, and maybe I'm moving a little bit fast, but here's summation of how to build the right size MVP. By the way, there's no perfect system for this, and I can almost guarantee you your first version of this will not be perfect, which is why I said earlier, you've got to iterate through the MVP multiple times until you have a level of confidence that you've got to problem solution fit. But how do I define and build the right MVP? So pre-MVP, before I even have built something, I'm defining my riskiest assumptions, I'm interviewing users, I can run experiments with stimulus and prototypes. Again, you can use AI tools for this, landing pages, clickable prototypes, maybe even functional widgets or things that I'm using to see, will anybody try this out? Will anybody use it? Maybe I am using AI to generate code here. I just don't want to fall in love. In my experience, when people build something and ship it, despite us telling them fall in love with the problem, not the solution, everybody falls in love with the solution. So the minute you've built something that you think is real and live, you're going to probably iterate on that and be less objective. So I still like to do some experimentation, prototyping before I build. Then I develop a hypothesis for the solution. Okay, I've done all of this sort of research and homework. By the way, this doesn't have to take months. This can be weeks of work. Now I think I know what the solution should look like based on the work I've done on DVF. Now I want to define the MVP scope. So I'm going to define what my core value is, my core feature set, the heart of my product. I'm going to draw a line in the sand that says, I think people should use this once a week to get the value. I can still run experiments with stimulus and prototypes. So I can map this thing out. I can show it to users. I can see what they think about it. And I want to document everything here. So whether we're thinking of a product requirements doc of some variety, but I'm a big fan of writing things down because I think it allows us, like as individuals, but also our teams to rally around something and look at it and evaluate it and be objective about it, as opposed to us just like randomly doing things. So again, this is all still pre-MVP. I did a whole bunch of research. I'm defining the scope. I'm defining what I think usage and success will look like. And then I'm building the MVP. I'm now evaluating the usage of that product qualitatively and quantitatively. I'm assessing value creation quantitatively and qualitatively, because usage alone, yeah, they're using it, but are they getting enough value? I don't know. So I need to talk to them and ask them. I keep iterating. And again, my goal is to get to problem solution fit, where I have a level of confidence that the problem I found is solvable with the product that I've built. And that's really the key for me when I think about what an MVP is and how to avoid the mistakes of building the wrong thing. So the product has to be real and usable. That's back to the definition number one. The smallest version of a product that solves a pain point. It has to be real and usable. It has to create value, and you have to be able to measure that value. If you have no usage, you have no learning. And that's why I don't think an MVP, that's why I think an MVP has to be a real usable product. The definition of it really, really matters. Do a bunch of that work before, but until we get actual usage of the product, our learning is a proxy of what is going to happen. We can validate with users, interview them, test things. Until we put it into people's hands, we're not really going to know what's going on. Remember, you're always experimenting. So don't build an MVP, launch it, and then go into maintenance mode or upgrade mode, or just think about it in like product management terms, where like, now we have a backlog and we'll execute the backlog and everything will be okay. Everything to me is an experiment almost forever, even when you're into product market fit. All right, so I'll leave it at that. I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much. I hope that was valuable, and we have lots of time for questions.
Hey, Ben, sorry about the technical difficulty in the beginning.
No problem.
I couldn't join. That was a great key concepts that you put it out there, and it's very valuable, and thanks for doing that. And I would like to, I love the Lean Analytics book, and I think it was really cool to start the concept in 2013 and bring it here. There's a couple of questions on the net, but I think we're going to come to it. For example, they say you're mixing AI to build fast and adding AI features topics.
Yeah.
Is it something that you believe in AI? I mean, I love the concept that practical AI for innovation, growth, and execution. I think you just launched Page.
We did.
That's a really cool concept. I haven't tried it yet, but is the concepts that you're putting it up here is part of that AI tool?
Yeah, so that's fair. I in a brief presentation like this, I am mixing those two things together. So let me break them apart for a moment.
Yeah.
Using AI to experiment and prototype and learn faster, amazing. Please do that. Be careful about using AI to just build, because AI unlocks your ability to build, including non-technical people, which is amazing. Be careful about just building stuff, shipping it and launching it, and then realizing nobody wants it. Despite the fact that AI condenses the time, I'm telling you, once you build and ship something, your brain tells you, I'm right, and you don't want to give up on that thing, as opposed to just taking a breath. Before I go and launch functionality, interview some people, test some things. So AI should speed up the process of building new things, but be careful about just launching stuff and throwing it on a wall. That's one. The second one is AI disrupting existing stuff. So SaaS software is dead. AI software is the new thing. I believe AI will affect every part of every industry, or almost every part of almost every industry on the planet. I think that genie is out of the bottle. But what I would suggest being careful about is looking at a process or a system. Let's pick any industry, construction, any old legacy industry, construction, insurance, banking, pick any of them. And you look at that and you say, why is that process so crappy? Why is it so slow? AI could solve it like that. And you say, cool, let me just build an AI tool. So one is using AI to speed up process. one is AI tools to solve inefficiencies. 100% going to happen. It's already happening. And that's also amazing. But if you do not understand the customer, you do not understand why they buy, you do not understand their fear of AI. Oh, I didn't realize I was putting you out of a job with the AI. Then you're going to get screwed. You're going to lose. So again, the fundamentals of understanding the problem, understanding the industry, understanding how people buy, understanding their fears, understanding their emotions, all of that is still critical if you go and launch AI solutions.
One of my favorite things that you bring it up, and that's why I usually I do this type of presentation as well, is why is much more important than how and what. Because how and what is very quick to, with the AI and all the technologies coming up, is easier, but finding it the why and be able to implement it is the core of majority of the products.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that we answer the questions from the audience, but let me ask this one. In situations where multiple functional social needs are present, is there a structured process to prioritize needs to address / test first?
Yeah, great question. So, and there probably will be at the very beginning. So, if you're looking at problems at a high level first and then trying to break them down, you will probably, for a particular user or customer group, you will probably find multiple problems, functional problems, and multiple, let's call them deeper needs, right? So you'll probably find multiple functional needs and deeper needs for any individual user or customer group. So your job there is to try to figure out which is the most painful and which one has the best opportunity for success. That's largely qualitative in nature, right? So that's through, let's pick, well, I'll use an example from Highline Beta, right? So we're going to build up to 10 companies in the dental space, solving problems for dental clinics. So when you go in so I know who the user is. It's somebody who owns a dental clinic, right? And there's some variation there. It could be an independent, dentist. It could be a dental service org that owns a bunch. So there's some variability there. But my job is to go in and figure out what are the biggest problems, not the fifth or sixth or seventh problem that person has, because they're not going to pay for that problem to be solved. So you find a user group, you'll find a whole bunch of problems. Your job now is to figure out which is the most painful, which is the one that is the biggest burning need, which will increase the odds of you being able to build a business around it, because that's the thing that they're going to want to pay for. One way to figure that out is which of the problems are they actively trying to solve today. So if you interview somebody, they'll tell you a whole bunch of problems, but which problem are they trying to build a solution for now? Which one are they already using something that's not good? Which one are they trying to hack the system to solve? So you have to try to figure out the one that's the most painful first, so that you can focus on that and not build a solution to problem number 6.
Yes, and that's very valid. And the other thing as well, whose problem is this we are solving is very important. You are from Salesforce. I have a background in Dynamics CRM from Microsoft. I think until those tools came through, CRM systems was to collect data for the company to withhold, so the salespeople can be switched very easily.
Right.
And that wasn't very successful.
Yeah.
And what was success is when you start enabling and making productive salespeople, and salespeople start to enjoy to use it. Okay, even the customer is the company is actually the salespeople that you are solving. And sometimes it is important to be able to differentiate who's buying this thing and
100%.
who's actually using it and why are they using it.
Yeah, so it's a great point, because again, when you do this kind of work, you might realize, oh, a salesperson has a very specific problem that they need solved. But if they're not the buyer, then you also have to understand the buyer. So the work that, again, like I think about that early pre-MVP work, some of it is like, let's call it stakeholder mapping. That sounds very sophisticated, but really it's just understanding the user and the buyer, and they're not always the same people, and they might not have the same motivations, which actually is a very good segue to, again, like back to this AI thing. I just built, not I, somebody builds an AI tool to make a process more efficient. The user of that tool might look at it and say, oh my goodness, I might be out of a job.
Yeah.
The boss might say, yeah, fantastic.
Okay.
You're going to be able to do it. That's just the reality, right? AI is going to take away jobs. I don't think we should pretend otherwise. Now, you might position it as an enhancer, right? So that, if you sell it top down and that person brings the tool and brings it to, a group of users in their company and says, please use this because it will enhance your work. That's often how it gets positioned. You rarely see a value prop cut your staff by 50% because it's hard to buy that and implement it without cutting half your staff. So understanding all the stakeholders involved in a process and their motivations to me is critical. And you also said before, understanding the why over the what and the how. The building is rarely the hard part. In regulated industries, it can be, right?
Yes.
It's not just functional, but regulation, legal compliance. Those things can be a hornet's nest sometimes. But the how is not the hard part. And I said it in my presentation, but I'll repeat it. I think that maybe the last vestige of a moat, you hear investors, what's your moat? What's your moat? What's your unfair advantage? Is actually your insight and your knowledge and your understanding of the user and the customer and the industry, because the moat is not the building. Like, we could all right now say, let's go build the exact same product, and we could all build it using the exact same AI tools. And like, what the heck is the differentiator? So now the differentiator is insight and knowledge, and perhaps access to customers, right? Distribution is still hard. So like, you and I can both build the exact same product today, the same landing page. AI will generate all of it for us. But if you have more access to the customer because you know them more deeply, you're going to win and I'm going to lose.
Yes. You're 100% right on that. I love the concept. The one thing that you mentioned in your presentation is analysis paralysis, and you give the example 6 months is too much. It's quite interesting what this AI world changed our timelines. What is analysis paralysis, and what I don't like about it, just because there's AI, analysis shouldn't go away. It might be shorter time, it might be deeper, but it's human understanding, and but AI will help. But the analysis paralysis could be 6 months. Analysis paralysis could be a week that we talk too much about this, and that is one thing that I think people with traditional and they don't want to give up the project management type of things is getting challenged.
Yes, agreed. I think AI enables us to do more faster, and that's not a bad thing, as long as we're not doing more faster with our, like headless chickens, where we're just sort of running around aimlessly doing it. So to me, being systematic about the process, and again, today in my newsletter on Focus Chaos, I wrote, did AI kill lean startup? Because there was like a video going around and a couple of posts on Hacker News, from Y Combinator saying AI has killed lean startup, because they misinterpreted, in my opinion, the whole point of lean startup was not spend 6 months interviewing users or interview 100 people. They'll tell you what they want, and then you build a thing and you win. That's never happened. But so AI will speed up the process, but it doesn't change the fact that if you're not solving a person's problem, they're not going to give you money. I just don't understand how that happens. And you're seeing it now with AI tools, because people are trying them, they're paying, and then they're churning out because it didn't really create enough value, or it's easy for me to go test 20 tools. Yeah. So like, there's no competitive differentiation anymore when everybody can build everything. And so the only core thing is be rigorous about the process, be intellectually honest, but do it fast, because speed is still a key component to figuring these things out before anybody else.
So one of the things that I think you bring it up is very important: churning users, understanding users. And I see quite a lot of startups, they kind of mix the managing a product and building the future of a product versus the marketing. So they concentrate so much on the happy users and great feedback. They miss the people who are churning out, not using, or not expanding the use to new features that they're putting it out there. I think that analysis becomes a very important part. I like talking with the unhappy users more than the happy users, to be honest. For marketing, obviously, you want to do the happy users, but as a product manager, you need to really start looking at why people are not using it and why people are moving away. If you're already lucky enough to make them test.
Yeah, unhappy users, I agree. I mean, unhappy users often hard to reach because they've churned out. So it's always hard to reach those users. Another way I think about this is it's often pretty easy to find an early adopter group. Everybody can find, whatever the number is, 10, 20, 50 users or customers. To me, I always like to figure out who's my best user and what makes them special. It might not be demographic information. Oh, they're all senior VPs of sales at large companies. It might be something else about those users that makes them your quote unquote best users. If you can figure out who they are and what makes them special, why do they love the product? Why do they use it so frequently? Why are they willing to pay? Then you can use that to go find that next group of later adopters. The key there for me is making sure the later adopters behave as positively as the early adopters. And I often see that be a place where we break. We found 10 users. They use the product a ton. We had a lot of other people who didn't use it. I'm going to ignore them because they're stupid. I don't know why. But I got these 10 people that use it. But because I don't understand them well enough, when I go and scale and start acquiring more users and they aren't behaving the same way as these, it's because I didn't build a replicable system for acquiring the right type of user. Now my churn goes up as my volume goes up, and now I'm in real trouble. So that's where I often see it break down because I don't understand why I even have good quality users in the first place.
Yeah. There was a question up there about doing a kind of a demoable product and start pitching and selling the future and land the first friendly customer to build the MVP for. What do you think about this kind of a promise that comes with the kind of a demoable product?
Yeah, I don't mind that as a strategy at all, particular B2B, particularly in enterprise. I think I've never been a huge, maybe because I'm just older, I've never been a huge fan of the term design partner, but I get it. So I absolutely think, and again, this is a great example of, hey, I could just use AI to build the whole MVP or the whole product right away. Why build a clickable prototype first and pre-sell it? Because the biggest risk, again, isn't can you build it, it's will anybody buy it and get value. So if you could co-design a product with a few early customers who see a thing and they say, hey, if you build that thing, I'll buy it from you, you're now de-risking significantly. It doesn't mean you'll get 1 million customers, but you've got a couple of folks that say, yeah, we'd be on board if you build the thing that you showed me. So I'm very much a fan of that approach. And again, AI can speed up the development of those prototypes, make them even look a little bit more complete than they are to sell the dream, de-risk that, figure out what pricing might look like on this thing, then go build it in a co-design partnership with those early customers. Chances are that's going to lead to building a better product.
Great. So we're coming towards the end of the our time. Ben, so this has been great, but give me like 3 things that I know you put it in the last slide of your presentation, but give 3 things that people like to should remember out of this presentation.
Sure. Yeah. Just because you can overbuild doesn't mean you should overbuild. That's number 1. Just because AI has now made everybody capable of building stuff doesn't mean we should build. I would say that's number 1. Yeah. I would say number 2, although I didn't really say this in the presentation, is if you have too rigorous of a product management or project management process, you are likely going to fail. And what I mean by that is often I see founders, builders, product people, whatever, just doing things on a task list. If I just do these 10 things, I win, right? At the end, it's just a process to get out the other side. But that's not what building new things looks like. Building new things always has a little bit of fuzziness to it. It always has a high degree of qualitative component to it. So I would say don't over processize how you build stuff, right? Because that's going to be a mistake as well. So don't overbuild, don't over processize, and just remember the fundamentals. The fundamentals are still true. People do not buy solutions to problems they do not have. It doesn't happen. So if you build something for the sake of building it just because you think it's a problem, but the user or customer disagrees with you, or it's not at the top of their list, they don't have the budget for it, you're going to lose and you're going to fail. So just remember the core principles of, I got to build something somebody actually wants, will use, get value from, and pay for.
Yeah. No, this is great. And I'll bastardize your page, but is practical, great insight for innovation, growth, and execution that you provided in this presentation. This has been great, and thank you for Glorium for providing us this opportunity to be able to share this. I learned a lot from this presentation. Thank you, Ben, and thank you for, and everybody follow Ben in the LinkedIn and be able to get updates on this thought process.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it. Hope that was helpful. And please feel free, folks, to connect anytime.
All right. Thank you very much.